Welcome to the Motoring Podcast, your weekly discussion of motoring news. This is episode 592 on Tuesday, the 20th of August, 2024. Hello, I'm Alan. And yes, nobody else with me this week. No menu because I forgot to write one and I've not had enough coffee to be witty yet. No follow-up either. Maybe we'll catch up on some stuff next week. But nothing, no immediate follow-ups from recent stories. So let's head straight into the new news. And we start in London. The ULEZ Scrappage scheme, of which the Mayor of London is incredibly proud, but it's a scrappage scheme, so I can't even pretend I'm a fan of it really, will end next month. So if you are a resident of Greater London and for some reason you decide you want to scrap your vehicle instead of just selling it to someone else somewhere else in the country, you have until 11:59 p.m. on the 7th of September to apply. If you are applying as part of community transport organisation, or if you have a disability, you have a bit longer. You have until some point in October 2027 to apply. But for private motorists, you have until 11:59 p.m. on the 7th of September. So far, 53,944 applications have been approved, with £186 million being given out in grants. Goodness, that seems like an awful lot of money. The scheme was launched in January 2023, is open to Greater London residents, and awards £2,000 for scrapping a car or for retrofitting a van or minibus that doesn't comply to the zone's emission standards. Those are at least Euro 4 for nitrogen oxide emissions on petrol cars, and diesel cars have to be at least Euro 6 for nitrogen oxide and particulate matters. There is a choice where instead of the vehicle getting scrapped, and there's a whole process you have to go through to get a certificate to then get your £2,000 rebate. You could also choose to donate them as part of a tie-up with the charity British Ukrainian Aid without forfeiting any of the grant value. And those, in that case, the vehicles are sent to the Ukraine in an effort to help rebuild the country. So definitely not to be painted green and turned into a technical, I'm sure. As I say, the Autocar article linked in the show notes has a detailed example of the process that you can go through should you be in a position to want to scrap your car. You listen to this show, so you're very unlikely to be doing that. You're more likely to be working out a canny way to find the oldest, cheapest, or most interesting vehicle which fits into the scheme, or to buy something. Jumping to Detroit now. We've covered a bunch of stories recently. We've been talking quite a lot about Volkswagen and Cariad and software engineering and how software is hard. General Motors seems to be tackling the software is hard problem by getting rid of about 1,000 software engineers. Seems like a mad thing to be doing right at the moment. There does seem to be, there's so much work that needs done in vehicle software to basically make it fit for purpose in many cases. And it does seem strange that... does it seem strange? It's General Motors. General Motors' own worst enemy because they can come up with something quite good and then just destroy it through internal politics. And it might be that that's what's happened here. There have been a couple of changes of leadership. Originally, Mike Abbott came from Apple and then left for health reasons. He's been replaced by two more ex-Apple people in the last little while. Chaps called Baris Cetinok and Dave Richardson. Worth mentioning, it's mentioned in this Autopian article, that both of those run or work out from GM's Mountain View Technical Center in California, and that most of the layoffs are outside of that. But then they also say, well, the Warren Technical Center in Michigan is much bigger than the California operation, so it could just be proportionally. It looks like a bigger number because but it might be the same or even a lower proportion. GM, by the way, one of the major users of the Android automotive systems that we mentioned last week about the fact that they are relatively easy to hack, and so much so with so much Android automotive dependency within GM that of course their latest vehicles, certainly here in the US, they're not offering Apple CarPlay at all. It is Android or nothing. And whilst that might be a great thing internally, but it might make some people warm and fuzzy, it seems that is not popular with buyers or potential buyers who are saying, well, actually, I want a car with CarPlay. So that is adding to some of the fun challenges that General Motors is having there. But yes, it's I'll link 2 stories in the show notes. I'll link Matt Hardegree's Autopian morning dump for the 19th of August in there. I'll also link to CNBC story on the same day. I don't know if you'll be able to read the CNBC story outside the US because of, it's easier not to comply with GDPR. What we'll do is we'll just geo block news sites instead, which is wonderful. Data privacy. Next story. This time, again, it's almost all software based, isn't it? Because that's just the way things are right at the moment. I should say it's relatively quiet week news-wise. Lots of people are still on holiday across Europe. And at the same time, there has been Monterey Car Week last week as well. So lots of PRs have been there, and lots of the news has been about shiny new supercars this week. So that's where the news world is focusing right at the moment. So as a result, dull news stories about everyday things are actually in a shortage, believe it or not. Anyway, this next one is about parking. Something called Quishing, which was a new term that I didn't know about before, which is essentially a phishing scam, but using QR codes. And what's been happening is that these fake QR codes have been appearing on parking meters, machines, signs all across the UK. So this has been reported in Northumberland, in Barking and Dagenham, in East London and Pembrokeshire and others. And it's not just been at parking meters. In some places, EV charging stations as well. So the idea is that it says, just scan here to pay. So you scan, you put in your details, you enter your card number. 20 minutes later, as is the way with all these things. In fact, the UI is probably better than most apps, really. Put in your card number, hit send, and of course you've just shared your card number with people, and then it just goes, error, doesn't work, and you just think that the machine's not worked or the site's not worked, and you maybe go and pay in another way. But what they've actually done is they've managed to get all your card details by mimicking a council website or a charging company website or similar. So do be careful, please. Don't rely on QR codes on signs and machines. Either use one of the multiplicity of apps that there are, which is always a fun route to frustration, or type in the URL yourself and the location code yourself, and do it that way. And that's one way to make sure you're absolutely in the right place. Of course, best of all would be if you could just pay at the machine, wouldn't it? Either coins or cards, but that seems to take effort, and unfortunately they're being phased out, which is not good for people who aren't technically literate or in places where there's little to no mobile service or any of these things. It's just bad. It is just bad laziness on the part of councils and parking operators. There should be some physical way of being able to pay, and people could use other methods if they choose. The other one, of course, is they always stiff you for an extra 50p whenever you pay online, which is just as ethical as everything else, really. Next piece of good news this morning is, according to a Reuters article from 13th of August, they're saying the headline is that the leasing model behind Europe's EV drive is at risk of breakdown. And curiously and interestingly, it does show a whole row of Tesla Model 3s and captions it as them being outside the Gigafactory. So 60% at least of all new cars in Europe are leased to some level or another, either on a PCP or on a full lease. And the leasing companies now are saying, well, is it worth us doing this? The cost of new cars is soaring, and the residuals, which we have to know so that we can work out how much we're going to charge every month, are low, or they're highly variable, or we just don't know what it's going to be. And so maybe we're just going to get out of this sector full stop. Now, you can decide and say, well, they are actually genuinely concerned, or they could put up the monthly prices, of course, or maybe they're just clubbing together and trying to put the scares on the European car industry and car sales to try to get some discounts on the new higher prices of stuff. And they're saying here that according to figures provided to Reuters by data firm AutoVista, resale values for EVs in Germany in early July were 24% below pre-pandemic levels and 30% lower. 24% lower in Germany and then 30% lower in Britain. That's compared to second-hand petrol models, which remained about 15% more expensive in both markets. Which is interesting, although there was that big surge for EVs just after the pandemic because they were kind of the ones that were easier to get hold of. So it's curious to see what's happening there. Anyway, it's one to keep an eye on. I think there's probably an underlying something behind that article, but I'm not 100% certain what it is. As I say, is it trying to twist the arms of manufacturers to offer better deals to big fleets, or is it something different? Last news story this week before Guilt Minute, and this one is one local to me at the moment, and I wasn't allowed this story last week because somebody claimed he was angry enough, thanks very much. And this is a story that Boston, and of course that's Boston, Massachusetts, not Boston, Lincolnshire, is to install AI automated stoplights in partnership with Google to reduce traffic. Yes, rather than relying on any real intelligence, the City of Boston, Streets Cabinet, and the Department of Innovation and Technology are going to be partnering with Google's Project Green Light team to improve traffic flow. And it says here the technology implemented uses AI to model traffic patterns and creates signal timing recommendations that can reduce stop-and-go traffic and emissions, according to officials. So essentially they're doing for traffic lights what a Nest thermostat does for your house, by measuring volumes and then adjusting the lights accordingly. I don't think it's happening in real time, which makes me wonder why it's going to be different from others. Is it just a different way of analyzing the data flows? Is it just machine learning being applied to it as opposed to someone sitting there with a little clicker going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 over every minute? Is it just better data collection by being able to count the vehicles? I'm not sure how it's doing it or what they're using to do the analysis. Is it cameras or is it perhaps, the induction sensors under the road? But they are saying that at some intersections in the middle of the city, stop-and-go traffic has been reduced by over 50%. So it's using the data from the program. And then it is actually being passed before traffic engineers to see if the recommendations can be safely and feasibly implemented. Traffic is a real issue in Boston, but not just there. It's actually on the interstate that passes through and under the middle of the city is a big challenge. If ever there was a place that would actually benefit from the sort of smart motorway style approach of variable speed limits and speed cameras to implement them at busy times, which is most of the time, and to sort of stop surges in traffic, everybody speeding up and then all hitting the brake lights and then causing those waves back through it, then it would actually be I-93 through Boston. It's one of those places I would love to see variable speed limits, because as it is, nobody pays any attention to any of them. And that actually is a key cause of some of the traffic issues between, heading into and out of Boston. I was going to say at peak times, but I drove through it on Saturday morning at just about 11 o'clock, and it was absolute chaos. So yeah, it doesn't really matter what time of day or night. Anyway, enough of that rant from me. That takes us neatly up to Guilt Minute, of course. And Guilt Minute is the quick break in the show, and we ask for tads of financial support to keep the lights on and the hosting running. If you feel the motoring podcast is worth a small consideration every month, then you can become a patron. The different levels of patron include different levels of commitment from us to you, including being able to watch the show recorded live. We have a small range of merchandise that desperately needs updating in our spring store, from stickers to mugs and t-shirts. If you don't have any spare cash, and we do completely understand, then you can help us by following for free from a podcast player to receive every show as they're released, and by liking and rating the show in whatever way your podcast supplier lets you. If you've done all that, and many of you do, so thank you so very much, the last thing you can do is to recommend us to your friends or colleagues. That brings us to new car news. So before we move on to the ridiculous, let's start with the sublime, or as close to sublime as the bigger, bolder Vauxhall Grandland will actually bring us. Vauxhall Grandland is coming very soon. It still has an awful name. At least the Crossland has now is being replaced by the Frontera, which is a much better name. They really should think to reintroduce, Monterey or something instead of Grandland. So this is the first Vauxhall model on the Stellantis STLA Medium platform. That's the same one as the Peugeot 5008 and derivations everywhere. It's now available to order ahead of deliveries beginning in October, and the base price is going to be £34,700. That, for the entry-level 134 horsepower hybrid, represents an increase of about £2,600 over the previous version of the Grandland with that powertrain, says Autocar. It's a much bigger vehicle than its predecessor, so that's one of the things that's worth bearing in mind there. And it probably also has a bit more kit, but it is also a bit more expensive. That 134 horsepower comes from a 3-cylinder petrol engine and a 28 horsepower 48 volt motor driving the front wheels through an auto. The cheapest version of the pure electric Grandland, which has 73 kilowatt hours and up to 325 miles of range, which is loads. And that bumps the price up to about £41,000. On a PCP, you can expect to put down about £2,000 and have a monthly payment of $469 for both cars over a 4-year term. 4 years for the ICE, 5 years for the EV, which is what accounts for that cost difference. But do you want to be counted? I don't know if I'd want to be tied into those for 4 years, but that's just me. My little brain doesn't necessarily work that way when it comes to financing vehicles. You can get Design, which is base, GS, and Ultimate trims as well. I expected to add more. Probably some form of special edition at some point, I'm sure. But yeah, interesting thing. It is bigger. It is the same kind of size as a RAV4 or an X-Trail. So very much kind of as big as most people would really want in suburban settings. It could almost be a Peugeot. But just to make sure you know it's a Vauxhall, it does say Vauxhall in red letters on the heck blend strip at the back between the rear lights, just to really sort of, emphasize the fact. Anyway, as I say, that was a sublime. Let's look at the ridiculous. The new Lamborghini Temerario was unveiled at Monterey Car Week in California. Looks like it looks the press pictures, right, dial back. The press pictures do not necessarily do this justice, because they're just against a sort of gradient background, and they do look a bit AI generic, make it look a bit like a Lamborghini supercar. But I've seen other pictures taken by real people in the outdoors with other people around, and it looks so much better in those pictures than it does in these highly touched up press pictures. So yes, don't judge the, I mean, I think I said earlier this week on one of the social media platforms that the pictures, the press pictures these days, I take them as a hint of what a vehicle's going to look like, and not an absolute, this is what the car looks like, you should make judgments from it. Because just some of them are just so hyper edited, it does the vehicle absolutely no justice whatsoever compared to what it really looks like. So Temerario has a new 4-litre 180-degree V8, and that puts out 789 brake horsepower, which is 158 more than the most powerful Huracan had. That figure is achieved between 9,000 and 9,750 RPM, with a red line at 10,000. To enable that, it has a flat plane crank, titanium conrods, 11,000 RPM capable finger followers, all sorts of very, 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 very race spec type stuff. The twin turbos supply 36 psi of boost at peak load. And it points out that's even more than the McLaren P1. Ultimately, that's 197 brake horsepower per litre. It's just crazy, crazy numbers. On top of that, you also have a 3.8 kilowatt hour battery pack in the central tunnel, and that can be charged from a plug, so it is a plug-in hybrid. So there's 3 more motors. They produce another 148 brake horsepower. There are 2 on the front axle and a third between the engine and the transmission. Just recharging the battery on the engine only takes 6 minutes, but it can be charged even at a 7 kilowatt hour charge. So a standard home one will only take 30 minutes when plugged in. I wonder how often that'll happen, but there we go. I'm almost looking forward to seeing one on the road. To be honest, it does seem to have moved the game on a bit, while still being pretty decent looking, I think. And I've really changed my tune on the looks, by the way, over the past week, because I've seen it a bit more and a bit more and a bit more. No mention of prices from Evo here, but yeah, I mean, that's yes, that is pretty cool. One last new car, BMW M5 Touring. It returns as a 717 brake horsepower. These numbers are just crazy. Hybrid, 0 to 62 mile an hour time of 3.6 seconds. Top speed of 189 miles an hour. V8 engine, plug-in hybrid. Will do those numbers whilst offering 1,630 litres of seats down boot space as well. I would really not recommend having the boot full whilst pulling that kind of number. It is 70 mil wider, 36 mil longer than the A5 Series Estate. Any of the others, I imagine because of sticky-on carbon fibre bits and, of course, those flared wheel arches. Probably the most disappointing thing about this entire car is the way the transition from the standard rear door skin into that rear arch. It really is kind of odd looking and really does look tacked on. I'm sure the styling... well, I don't know. It is BMW stylists, isn't it? Maybe they just don't care. But I would hope that they're a little bit upset by the way that obviously they were forced to do that from budgetary constraints, I guess. Which seems a bit strange to call it a budgetary constraint, given the cost of this starts from £112,500, so about £1,000 over the cost of a standard M5. UK deliveries begin in early 2025. North America's all happy because the USA is going to be getting it as well. That's it for new car news this week. We'll probably cover couple more from Monterey next week when Andrew's back, and maybe even a sub £24,000 electric SUV. Oh, we did cover an electric SUV. It's not a proper week of new car news if we don't cover an electric SUV. Points of interest for this week. First up, Lunchtime Read. I like this from Haggerty by Brendan McAleer. It's talking about in Vermont, the hills were alive with the sound of Mercedes, and it's talking about the real, not Julie Andrews, Maria von Trapp, and how she used to razz her way around rural Vermont in a series of sporty Mercedes. It is a lovely part of the country. If you happen to find yourself accidentally in Vermont, then the area around Stowe is really gorgeous. The Von Trapp family brew house, they have a very successful brewery and guest house now, which started just as a small thing and has spread. Good beers. The Von Trapp Brewery and Beer Hall, really nice place to go for lunch. Excellent Austrian food and stunning views. Really, really nice. So if you are around, you should go visit. But in the meantime, you should go read this article from Haggerty. It tells of her love for Mercedes and just yes, what an absolute car nut she was. So well worth a few minutes of your time on that one. List of the week. It's been a tough one this week. List of the week this week is the most controversial cars made by Mercedes-Benz, courtesy of Autocar, which is reveling in the delight that Autocar slideshows now work. It's a funny and mixed one, this. Some of them you think, where on earth is the contentiousness there, and others you go, well, of course it is. So I'm going to choose the R Class from 2005. So the sort of cross between estate, MPV, and SUV sports saloons, and the fact that you could get it with a 6.2 litre V8, the R63 AMG. Only about 200 were sold because you had to really need, want, or desire an extremely particular set of things there. But I've always thought the R-Class was kind of cool. It looked much better in the facelift. Definitely helped. But yeah, one of those kind of forgotten vehicles out there. The trouble is that they were from Mercedes is not very high quality time. And so maybe not the best advert for Mercedes quality, and their rarity mean that they might be a little bit tricky to keep on the road. But I still think they're a cool concept. I really do. I'd much rather see more vehicles like that rather than more sort of jacked up SUVs. I mean, to be honest, they take up about the same road space, but it's the principle that counts, really. And finally this week, we turn to New York. So we talked about AI in Boston a little bit earlier on. So we're going to move a little bit down the coast and go to New York City. New York put in many hundred traffic cameras over the last couple of years. And the idea was that this was to turn into a congestion charging scheme for driving into Manhattan and around Manhattan, because really you should be trying not to do that, and it would help reduce and relieve congestion, because New York has a comprehensive public transport system, and really it makes far more sense for people to use that than to drive. That, however, was cancelled at the 11th hour, so now there's an awful lot of cameras in around Manhattan, and actually much across Greater New York City as well, by the looks of the map from here. But yeah, what do you do with them? Well, you use them for surveying traffic, but somebody else realised that there was a way that the New York Department of Transport live streams the output from all these cameras. So why not turn it into an art project? So what you can actually do is you can stand under one of the traffic cameras, and there is a mobile website. It compares where you are with the camera nearest you. And if you're standing under it, it will take a snapshot from the live stream, and it will send it to you as a photo to your phone. So you can use them as a photo booth to take pictures of you or your group of friends when you're out and about in New York. Yeah, exactly. It's a bit mad. So this was the sort of brainchild of Maury Coleman. He says, what I like about this project specifically is that people love to be given something, especially something about themselves. Giving people the opportunity to take selfies of themselves through these traffic cameras, I thought it was an interesting and fun way to raise awareness about large surveillance apparatus around New York City in a way that's fun and kind of lighthearted, and people want to engage with because they get something out of engaging with it. So yeah, it's a way of actually sort of interacting and to an not messing around. That's not quite right with these cameras, but also raising awareness and having people know it's there and know it exists. Then that they are aware of the very high number of cameras there are around New York City. A lot of this is a knock-on effect from obviously terrorist activity in the past and the Twin Towers. New York is very, very sensitive in general. What I'll do is link you into the Jalopnik article by Bradley Brownell here, and there's links through from there both to New York Post story that goes into more detail, and also to the trafficcamphotobooth.com, all one word, where you can do it. That only works from a mobile device. So I think that's it for this week. I hope. I can't turn around and ask anyone else if that's it for this week, so I hereby declare it for this week. So don't forget, folks, both of us will be here next week, thank goodness. Don't forget that between now and next time, you can give us any feedback, share your thoughts with the show at Motoring Podcast on Twitter and Instagram, on Facebook, and on the contact page of motoringpodcast.com, the hub of all our activities. Remember, you can support us financially via Patreon. Please leave a review and rating on Apple Podcasts, or however your podcast app lets you do such a thing. You can get in touch with me. Most of the social media sites used by people over the age of 35, where I'm at AJP Bradley. That's Bradley. To get in touch with Andrew, cracked a windscreen on most of the social sites, or his real name on LinkedIn, should you be into that sort of thing. As I say, we'll both be back very soon, but until then, I've been Alan Bradley, and safe motoring.